About a year ago, the only Pixar movie I hadn't seen was Cars 3, and as I was looking for movies to watch with a friend, I thought, hey, I should finally get around to watching that. But of course, we couldn't just watch Cars 3 without having some background, so we had to start with the first Cars. A few days later, we watched Cars 2, but before we watched Cars 3, I remembered that there were two movies that took place in the world of Cars, their logo not mine, that, while not made by Pixar, were made by Disney, who own Pixar, and thus could technically count as canon. These were the Planes movies, so of course we had to watch those next. We were watching Cars movies so much that while on a road trip, the person I was watching them with saw a Cars sales place and thought, oh, it's like Cars, but in real life. So you can tell our minds were definitely not broken by this point. But finally, we watched Cars 3, and the adventure of watching way too much Cars in way too short of a time was complete. But as we watched these glorious movies, we realized there were some oddities about the world of Cars, and we discussed them at length. These discussions got so consistent that I thought maybe I should do something about my strange obsession with Cars and make a video about it. So I tried writing a script for it, about 10 months ago. While writing it, I stumbled upon a problem, which was that I was trying to write a comedy script, but I was taking what I was talking about a bit too seriously. So I stopped writing the script. But what I didn't stop was constantly annoying my friends with discussions about Cars. So here I am again, in an attempt to maybe have a way to stop my annoying public discussions by making them much more public and putting them on YouTube instead. So here's the deal. I will be talking about a bunch of thoughts I have about the world of Cars in a series of videos, starting with talking about the movies themselves. They might be funny, they might not. I will not be bothering to have a consistent tone because that's too much work. Now that that's been established, let's look at Cars. Yep, this is some Cars. For those of you that don't know, Cars is a movie. Cars takes place in a world where everyone is a vehicle. Our main character, Lightning McQueen, is a rookie race car who's really good at racing and really bad at being a decent human being. No, it's not because he isn't a human being. On his way to a tiebreaker race, which is across the country from the original race for some reason, he gets lost and ends up in the middle of Hicksville, Nowhere, Arizona, also known as Radiator Springs. He gets stuck there because he gets arrested for causing a massive amount of property damage because he's a race car, and apparently he was only ever taught to go, not stop. There, he gets a best friend, finds love, gets a mentor, and learns the meaning of humility and also how to race better. Then he goes and loses his big race, but it's okay because he won in here, and that's what really matters. I really like it, especially the ending, which is actually very emotional. A common complaint is that it just stole the plot from Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox, but I've never seen Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox, and I don't want to bother watching Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox, so I'm not going to comment any more on that. Now, I could go over the plot little by little, but I don't feel like it. Instead, let's look at the two sections the movie is split into, the racing world and Radiator Springs, and the characters in each. We'll start with the racers. Our main character is Lightning McQueen. He's exactly how you'd expect a young car that's too good at something for his own good to be, aka he's incredibly cocky and doesn't like working with other cars, including his nice sponsors who, pay him. That's okay though, because the entire point of the movie is that he learns to be humble and appreciate others. By the end of the movie, he's humble, but that doesn't stop him from slightly roasting his rivals and being himself. I feel like this is an important part of his character growth because it shows that becoming a better person doesn't necessarily mean being a completely different person, it just means being a better version of yourself. Then there's the other two racers that matter in the slightest, the King, aka Strip Weathers, and Chick Hicks. The movie gets kicked off because the three of them tie in the Grand Prix, so they need to race again as a tiebreaker. The King is the old man of the group, the experienced champion, and would probably have worked really well as a mentor to Lightning had he not gotten lost in Radiator Springs. He's good because he's actually experienced at racing and knows how to work with people. Lightning McQueen is good because he's insane and does stuff like this. Chick Hicks is good, but only ever second place good. The reason he gets anything else is because he assaults every other car on the racetrack. Now, for some reason, this and this and this is allowed, and I was going to go on a tirade about how this feels like it shouldn't be allowed and probably isn't allowed in real racing, but apparently this kind of stuff is actually pretty common in the real world. So what do I know? I don't think it makes it right or not concerning, but I guess it makes it accurate. And I guess at least both in the real world and in the world of cars, people that do that are shamed. Lightning and Chick also make a lot of meme jokes to each other, which makes sense as they're rivals. And I know Chick is the villain, but this...
That must be really embarrassing, but I wouldn't worry about it, because I didn't do it!
is the best joke in the movie. We also have Mac. He's a truck, and also Lightning's chauffeur? I'm sure there's a name for the guy that moves other people's race cars from race to race, but I don't even know how to look up the name for that. And Mac drives Lightning around because he's his own race car, so that makes things a little bit weird. Mac seems nice enough, though he's not really on screen enough to have much of a character. He seems to be the closest thing Lightning has to a best friend before he ends up at Radiator Springs. He's also kind of under the thumb of Lightning at the beginning of the movie, which I guess makes sense considering he technically works for Lightning. His main purpose in the movie is to fall asleep on the road because Lightning convinced him to drive through the night and then get bullied by some sports cars while asleep and accidentally release Lightning into the middle of nowhere and keep driving. When he shows back up at the end of the movie, he seems almost scared of what Lightning will do to him because Mac lost Lightning. I mean, to be fair, that's kind of a major thing, but still. Then he barely exists in the rest of the trilogy. I hope he's off having fun when we don't see him, because he feels like the very few times we do see him, he is very much not having fun, and I feel bad for him. Sure, he's a very minor character, so I shouldn't be thinking this much about him, but shut up. Then there's Harv. Now, if you've ever watched Cars, you may be thinking, who's Harv? And that's a good question, because we never actually see Harv. In fact, he's apparently such a minor character that he doesn't even show up in the other movies. But he's also Lightning's agent, which feels like a really important thing to have as a race car, so I'm a little weirded out that he shows up twice in Cars, through phone calls mind you, and never again. Was he fired? Was he part of the reason Lightning is such a cocky bastard? I really want to know. He doesn't seem to care about Lightning at all, to the point where he doesn't even watch the Piston Cup. I don't know a lot about racing agents, but that feels weird. Then he's happy that Lightning went missing because of the publicity. Harv seems to exist only to show Lightning's uncaring world of racing and point out that Lightning has no friends except Mac, and he still bullies Mac. It's rude. That's the important characters from the racing side of things, so we look at what Radiator Springs can offer us. Most of the movie takes place in Radiator Springs, so there's a lot of characters to look at there. But don't worry, most of them have like one character trait. Lightning McQueen's best friend is a tow truck he meets at Radiator Springs called Tow Mater, because he's a tow truck, and Tow Mater sounds like how he'd say tomato. I'm sure that means something. They're friends because they have ridiculous imaginations and like doing stupid things, though Mater seems to like doing them a bit more, to the point where he's a menace to society. Also, Mater chose Lightning as his best friend, and Lightning was so desperate for friends that he was immediately happy about this. In case you can't tell, I really don't like Mater, which I did not realize is apparently a controversial opinion, so I am sorry about that, but he's annoying and stupid and an awful car. Sally is a love interest. In a surprising twist, that's not her entire character. Don't worry, we'll get to the one-note characters soon enough. Instead, Sally actually gets a kind of arc to her story that, while once Lightning shows up does kind of revolve around him, doesn't revolve around being his love interest. She's the youngest car in Radiator Springs by like 40 years, which makes her really the only option for a love interest for Lightning, but it also makes her the perfect candidate for the only person in the town who really seems to have any hope. Her plot, along with the plot of the entire town, revolves around the fact that way back when, 40 years ago before Sally showed up, Radiator Springs used to be a thriving town. That all changed when a highway was built to replace Route 66, which goes through Radiator Springs. Pretty quickly, no one was going through Radiator Springs and instead just rushed by on the highway, causing Radiator Springs to become desolate and empty. After Sally found the place, she fell in love with it and has been trying to get the town to return to its former glory, with pretty much no success. I like this plotline, and I like how it incorporates the real world Route 66 and what probably happened to a lot of towns out there when highways took over. There's kind of two resolutions to it, one that's a major part of the movie, and one that's more part of the credits than anything. The one that's a major part of the movie has Lightning go and help all the people who still live there, mostly by buying things, and then he lights up the city with neon like it used to be. He does this for Sally, who wanted to see what the town was like in its heyday, but also because he's fallen in love with the town too, and it's a really sweet moment. Until you look at all the neon signs and see most of them are for stores that are still very much closed, and it gets just a little sadder. Of course, during the credits, the town becomes bustling once again, but still. Going back to Sally, her introduction is a bit odd. Lightning is in court because he destroyed the main road of Radiator Springs because instead of stopping when something was stuck to him, his plan was to drive faster. He's about to get let off because the judge, Doc Hudson, doesn't want to deal with him when suddenly Sally bursts through the doors to stop the proceedings. And based on what happens next, the only thing that I can conclude is that Lightning assumes that she's his lawyer because he's a cocky bastard and she's hot. Now, I want to point out, though I hope this doesn't need to be said, I don't think a car is hot. I'm not a member of Queen or this guy, but based on how she's presented in the movie, she's supposed to be hot. It's a bit odd, and made much worse by the fact that Lightning immediately starts, well, I guess flirting is a nice way of putting it.
All you have to do now is stand there and let me look at you.
I really don't like this scene. And listen, I get that a case of mistaken identity is a classic way to introduce a character, especially a love interest, but it still feels weird and a bit pointless. The only thing I can think of that makes sense in the universe is that Lightning saw that everyone else in the town was old and saw someone slightly younger and immediately thought there's no way she's from here, which is technically true. The problem with that idea is that the movie just presents it as Lightning sees a hot car and assumes she's his lawyer. She also has a pinstripe tattoo back there, or they could have just called it a tramp stamp like it is. And, you know, I gotta say, it feels weird for a kid's movie about cars to not only have a car have a tramp stamp, but also have another car point it out. Like, maybe it's a little something for the adults to show that Lightning was looking at Sally's ass, cause you know what I want in my movie is when one car looks at another car's ass and points out their tramp stamp. Come to think of it, there's a lot of ass in this movie about cars. What is happening? In general, though, I don't actually mind Sally. Sure, she's a pretty generic love interest, but she has pretty decent chemistry with Lightning when he's not being a creep, and she still has her own motivations and character, which is nice. The last main character in Radiator Springs is Doc Hudson, an old race car himself that crashed during a race one day and never went back because by the time he healed, he was a has-been. He fills the role of the gruff, reluctant old mentor that teaches Lightning how to race better. Because remember, this movie is technically about racing. He's also the best character in the movie, excluding Mac, though that may just be because gruff mentor characters are inherently the best character in any movie. He also starts the movie hating Lightning and everything he stands for, and then by the end changes his mind, and is the guy he's the guy at the pit stop that gives Lightning tips during the. I'm sure there's an actual name for that guy, but I did not do any research on these videos except watching every Cars World movie multiple times. I don't even know if the things I'm saying are at all original, and I don't care. He was even the best of the best in his heyday. Cause you gotta have that cliche too. Nah, but honestly, Doc's great. My one problem with him is that there's this moment at the end where he tells the world where Lightning's been all this time, because he was missing actually. And Lightning gets taken away to finish the race that was the whole reason for his crossing the country in the first place. And like, on one hand, at that point it felt like Doc and Lightning had some heart-to-heart and were starting to get along. So this feels like a weird thing for Doc to do. But on the other hand, Lightning has a job, and his job is to race. And he's literally holding up the most important race of the country because he was arrested? Like, yes, he's done his community service, so it's time for him to go back to work. But clearly Doc did it for selfish reasons and to get rid of Lightning, and it's treated like a betrayal, though Lightning could very easily come back after the race, which by the way he does, and then lives at Radiator Springs for the rest of the movies, so it's not that big a deal. I know I'm making this a big thing, but that's just because they made it a big thing, and it doesn't make any sense. Of course, Radiator Springs is an entire town, so of course we need an entire town's worth of cars. So, like 9. And they all have 1 or 2 character traits. There's Sheriff, who's the gruff old sheriff, Red, the cowardly fire truck, Ramon, the paint job guy, his wife Flo, who runs the bar gas station thing, don't worry about it, Fillmore, who's a hippie, Sarge, who was a Sarge in the war, I guess, and bickers a lot with Fillmore, Luigi and Guido, who are Italian, like Ferraris, and sell tires. Hey, that's kinda like 3 character traits. Okay, they do actually have 1 other character trait. Luigi talks a massive amount, and Guido barely talks at all, but is amazing at his job. Then there's Lizzie, who's senile, and it's funny. Trust me, it's comedy gold. Her husband actually founded the town, so, she's been there an extremely long amount of time. Honestly, I like the side characters. Sure, they're mostly one note, but they're side characters. They don't need to be anymore. It's not like they're getting bullied like Mac or something. Okay, I'll stop talking about Mac. For now. They all also act like people who haven't seen anyone from the outside world in years would, i.e. just a little odd. Probably the oddest thing is that everyone in Radiator Springs, besides Sally and Lightning, are supposed to be around 60, which sometimes they don't really feel like. And that means that probably 20-year-old or whatever young car age is, Lightning's best friend is like 60. But he can do what he wants, that's not really an issue character-wise for the others. They don't exactly feel like young'uns either. There's one more thing I want to say, and it doesn't really have to do with the characters. When we first see Radiator Springs, Fillmore is saying that the flashing yellow light is longer every 3rd flash, which is funny because almost every time they show that light, they cut off the scene before the 3rd flash ends, so you can't tell, but you can still use the beginning scene to check, and I checked for the first few lights, and he's wrong. The light turns on and off every 1.5 seconds. It's a little disappointing, but at least now we know. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the first Cars movie. This got a lot more in depth than I expected it to be, and I don't think the other videos about the movies by themselves will be as in depth, but we'll see. I think, all in all, Cars is a movie.